Okay, so what is desktop publishing? Early on in my career, I heard it explained best this way. Imagine you take a brochure that you've designed and you show it to your grandmother, and your grandmother says, "Oh, this is beautiful. Did you design these cool graphics?" And you say, "Oh, no, no, the graphic designer designed those." And she's like, "Oh, okay. Well, did you take these beautiful pictures?" And you say, "Oh, no, no, the photographer took the pictures." And she says, "Oh, well, did you write all this interesting copy?" And you say, "No, no, the copywriter wrote the copy." And your grandmother looks quizzically at you and says, "Well, what did you do?" And you say proudly, "Well, I designed it." That's desktop publishing, basically. Now, what I've found pretty much is the rule now is it is going to be rare and also a very large company where that story would be true, where your task would be just desktop publishing. Most times now it will be desktop publishing along with graphic design, along with copywriting, or at least copy editing. You might be tasked as the photographer. If not the photographer, maybe you would have to tweak those images in some way, color correct, or um, maybe edit them in a certain fashion to get rid of an errant logo or something in the background. You will almost definitely have to design graphics, things like that. And it's also now bleeding heavily into the electronic realm as well. There may be a web designer or web developer on your staff. You might be tasked with doing that. You might have a social media specialist on your staff. You might have to do that. You might have to design a marketing strategy that includes social media posts that look just like the website, that look just like your printed materials, that look just like your annual report, that looks just like the ad you're putting in a magazine. And that's going to be a lot of times falling on, like I said, falling on a desktop publisher, unless you're in a large company that has many people that can take on these roles. You might, as a desktop publisher, have to do two, three, or more of these roles. Right. So that's basically what desktop publishing is. Now, how it got its start, we can go all the way back to like the first printing presses. This is a replica of Guten's printing press. Gutenberg, and he was the first one that put movable type into a press that could then have ink applied to it, and you would print one page at a time. Now, most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with printers that you see sitting on your desktop. That's just a regular printer. But printing nowadays for magazines such as Sports Illustrated and Esquire, something like that, would look something like this. They are roughly the size of maybe two or three tractor trailers in a row. They would have multiple colors. Some of them are four, where each one of these towers would apply a color. Okay, and then the paper goes in. This is a sheet fed one, so these are sheets of paper. You can see how large that is. Other times they're fed with paper that's on rolls that needs to be loaded with a forklift. And these run nonstop. The paper runs through the press at such a fast speed that if you were to put your hand against the paper, you would slice your hand clean off like a scalpel. It would be very dangerous. The paper also goes through a dryer that heats the paper to dry the ink. And apparently, it would set the paper on fire if the paper were to actually stop, but it passes through so fast that it never actually ignites. So these presses are massive, they are loud, and they are only making money when they are running nonstop. So they do that, they run nonstop. They load the paper and they go, go, go. So that's what a printing press looks like nowadays. Okay. And we'll get a lot more into colors and how to create something for press here in a few minutes. But one thing I do want to cover, which is some of the terminology, will be some of the file types that we're going to be experiencing and using going forward. Okay, so I'm sure you're all familiar with PDF, which stands for Portable Document Format. It's an Adobe format, and you may be familiar with it, but not familiar with how it came about. So back when all of this was first getting started, around 1984, Apple Computer, the software was starting to come out. You could get a file together, right? So it's your brochure with its fonts and its graphics and its photography. And you would have to collect all of that together electronically and then send it to what we then called a service bureau, what was basically a printer. You would send it to the printer, and then it would come back, a week or two later as a magazine or a PDF or what have you. But to save space back then, because file sizes were a problem, electronic media, digital storage was still a thing that had to be considered, they wouldn't send an entire font. They would send just the characters that you used in your printing document. And sometimes these fonts, you had to pay for them. You had to own them. You had to buy this font. And your font might not exactly match the font that your service bureau had. So you would send them this font in this file. They would swap out their font or your font with their font. And, on page 64, one word would bump to the next page and you'd have reflow and the entire print job would be in the trash. So PDF created a way to subset everything. It would collect it all together. It would collect every piece of font that you needed. It would collect all your images. It would collect all of your graphics. It would put them all in one locked file that could then be sent to the service bureau, and they would have everything that they would need to successfully print your job. And that's how PDF came about. It's basically a security feature, a way to lock something down so that no one else could change it. And anyone who's ever had to edit a PDF knows how difficult they are to edit. That's because they were initially designed to not be edited. So that's how PDF came about. Now, we talk a lot about JPEG, GIF, PNG, and why they exist. So JPEG exists, as its name indicates, the Joint Photo Experts Group file format for photos, pictures, things taken with a camera, right? Everything that has hundreds or thousands or millions of colors in it is best saved as a JPEG. Okay, just the way the compression schemes work, it's best saved. It's best used on these million color images. Now, GIF came along, graphic interchange format. It was actually owned by a company, pretty sure it still is, called CompuServe, so that if you are a software manufacturer like Photoshop and you want to save or offer the ability to save as a GIF, you have to pay CompuServe some money. So people didn't like that. That sort of led to how PNG, Portable Network Graphics, came into being, because PNG is free to use. What PNG doesn't do that GIF does, and PNG does do this with some modification, but GIF can allow you to do an animation, an animated GIF, where PNG doesn't offer that, at least not natively. Okay, and then there's SVG, the scalable vector graphics. This came along a little later, and it allowed you to incorporate additional information into the image that would allow it to be scalable, large. You can make print it on the side of a building and on a matchbook at the same time. But that additional information that you can put in that file causes security concerns. So basically, like stock WordPress won't allow you to use SVG without you having to do a little bit of a dance. And the best example that I ever saw of this was at a conference one time where a developer added code into the graphic that whenever the graphic loaded onto a browser screen, so basically whenever the graphic rendered, it would call his phone. So he actually put enough code into it that it would actually dial a phone number every time it appeared on a screen, every time it was rendered out. So obviously embedding that kind of information into an image file would freak out security people, of course, cybersecurity people. So it can be used, except for in these certain situations where that kind of security is going to cause an issue. All right. Now you'll see .indd, .psd, .ai. Those are the file formats for your Adobe programs: InDesign, Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator. Okay. And those are the native file formats. Now, there was a point where if you saved a file as like an Illustrator file, .ai, or a PSD file, Photoshop file, .psd, put that into a file. Say I imported my .psd file into my document, saved my document, send it to my service bureau. They would have to send it back. You can't, basically they can't, what's called RIP, raster image process. They can't process in a native Adobe file. That has since changed. You can do that now. But that basically led to what is the next two file formats, the EPS and the TIFF. Because, like I said, you couldn't send a file as a Photoshop file and get it processed. You had to save it as another file format. So that's why you would save it either as an EPS or a TIFF. EPS more for graphics, TIFF would be more for imagery. So those aren't used as much anymore, so you can now save these files directly as InDesign, Photoshop, etc. And then what we're not going to get into, we're not going to cover, will be any audio or video file types, especially video. That's an entire class all in and of itself. So we will skip those because that's starting to get finally out of the realm of what could be considered desktop publishing. Though it is completely possible that your desktop publishing gig might require some light video editing, especially with the popularity now of social media and video in social media. So basically having video editing skills is just another tool you can add if in this kind of a career. So now we'll get into some of the color presentations.